Mount 17. 24 As a drachma was the equivalent of about a day's wages, a woman might reasonably sweep her whole house and diligently search for a lost drachma coin. Luke 15. 8, 9. Judas Iscariot betrayed Jesus for 30 pieces of silver, evidently the price of a slave. Mount 26. 14-16, 47-50 No doubt these silver pieces were either shekels or other coins similar in value. But the kind of coin is not specified in the account, except for their being silver. Money can be both beneficial and harmful. Money provides a defense against poverty and its attendant troubles, enabling persons to procure both necessities and luxuries. Compare EC 7. 12. 10. 19. For this reason the possibility exists of a person's beginning to trust in money as security, and o textoi acute miritra longo, money changer 428 themselves, committed murder, betrayed others, and falsified the truth. The 16. 19. 23. 18. 27. 25. S 22. 12. Mount 26. 14, 15. 28. 11-15. On the other hand, the proper use of money is approved by God. Luke 16. 1-9 It includes contributing toward the advancement of pure worship and giving material assistance to those in need. Compare 2 Ch 24. 4-14. Row 12. 13. 1 Jo 3. 17, 18. See contribution. Gifts of mercy. Although much good can thus be done with money, the most valuable things, spiritual food and drink, eternal life itself, can be obtained without it. Isra 55. 1, 2. Re 22. 17. Money changer. One whose function included the exchange of one currency for another and coins of one value for those of another value. For each transaction the money changer received a certain fee. Thus, the Greek word kol *sts money changer comes from the term kol vos, a small coin paid as a commission for changing money. The Greek word kol *sts money broker or coin dealer in John 2. 14 is related to kermah, rendered coin, in the following verse. Other services mentioned in the Jewish Mishnah as being provided by money changers were the safekeeping of money and the payment of wages upon the presentation of drafts. Bava Metzia 3. 11. 9. 12. In the time of Jesus' earthly ministry the annual temple tax was 2 drachmas at a drachma. Mount 17. 24 As Jews from widely scattered lands came to Jerusalem for the celebration of the Passover and paid this tax then, the services of money changers may have been needed to exchange foreign currency for money that would be acceptable for payment of the temple tax, if not also the purchase of sacrificial animals and other items. According to the Mishnah Shekel in 1. 3, on the 15th of Adar, or about a month before Passover, the money changers set up for business in the provinces. But on the 25th of Adar, when Jews and proselytes from many other lands would be arriving at Jerusalem, the money changers established themselves in the temple area. It was at the temple that Jesus Christ on 2 occasions overturned the tables of the money changers and condemned them for having made the temple into a house of merchandise or a cave of robbers. Jo 2. 13-16. Mount 21. 12, 13. Mr. 11. 15-17 This may imply that Jesus regarded the fees of the money changers as exorbitant. In this regard it is noteworthy that there were times when great profits were made on the sale of sacrificial animals. The Mishnah tells of a time when the price for a pair of doves was a golden dinar 25 silver dinars. This prompted Simeon the son of Gamaliel to declare, "By this temple I will not suffer the night to pass by before they cost but a silver dinar." On that very day the price was drastically reduced. Keratot 1. 7 Translated by H. Danby. Month. See calendar. Monument. A pillar, a plaque, a building, or other marker set up as a reminder of some person or some special event. A few of such are mentioned in the Bible, though not all of these are referred to as monuments. Jehovah appeared to Jacob in a night vision, confirming the Abrahamic covenant toward him 1781 BCE. In commemoration, Jacob took the stone he had used as a pillow, set it up to resemble a pillar, and anointed it with oil. He then called the place Bethel. GE 28. 10-19 Some 20 years later Jacob and Laban, upon concluding a covenant of peace between themselves, set up a pillar, also a heap of stones, in the mountainous region of Gilead, there to serve as a reminder of their agreement. GE 31. 25, 44-52 When Jehovah brought Israel into the Promised Land 1473 BCE 2 monuments were set up at the place where they crossed the Jordan River, one in midstream and the other on the W bank of the river, at Gilgal. These were to be memorial signs commemorating that miraculous crossing, and when their sons thereafter asked what these monuments represented, their fathers were to recount O textoi acute miritra longo. Moon 429 Absalom, Jehovah promises to give them something better than sons and daughters, namely, to give to them in my house and within my walls a monument Heb. Yed and a name. A name to time indefinite I shall give them, one that will not be cut off. Isra 56. 4, 5. Compare PR 22. 1. Gravestones were also set up as memory aids, as for example, the one that marked the burial place of the man of the true God who foretold what Josiah would do against the altar at Bethel. 2 Kai 23. 16-18. 1 Kai 13. 1, 2. Moon. The lesser luminary for dominating the night, provided by God as a means for marking appointed times. GE 1. 16. PS 104. 19. J 31. 35. 1 Co 15. 41 The Hebrew word for moon Yamidal.Riak is closely related to the Hebrew word Yarak, meaning lunar month. Since the lunar month always began with the appearing of the new moon Heb. Chodesh, the term new moon also came to mean month. GE 7. 11. X 12. 2. Issa 66. 23 The Greek word smidl.leone is rendered moon, while the Greek word men has the idea of a lunar period. Lu 1. 24. If 4. 10. Also col 2. 16, when near middle.me new moon occurs. The word leva middle.na, meaning white, occurs 3 times in the Hebrew text poetically describing the white brilliance of the full moon that is particularly evident in Bible lands. Ka 6. 10. Issa 24. 23. 30. 26 The word Kais or Kaisa, meaning full moon, also appears twice. PS 81. 3. PR 7. 20, RS. Since the average lunation from new moon to new moon is about 29 days, 12 hours, 44 minutes in length, the ancient lunar months had either 29 or 30 days. This may originally have been determined by simple observation of the appearance of the new moon's crescent. But in David's time we find evidence of its being calculated beforehand. Once a 20. 5, 18, 24-29 Nevertheless, in post-exilic times the Mishnah Rosh Hashanah 1. 3. 2. 7 states that the Jewish Sanhedrin met early in the morning on the 30th day of each of 7 months in the year to determine the time of the new moon. Watchmen were posted on high vantage points around Jerusalem and carried immediate report to the Jewish court after sighting the new moon. Upon receiving sufficient testimony, the court announced, "It is consecrated," officially marking the start of a new month. If cloudy skies or fog caused poor visibility, then the preceding month was declared to have had 30 days, and the new month began on the day following the court assembly. It is also said that further announcement was made by a signal fire lit on the Mount of Olives, which was then repeated on other high points throughout the country. This method was evidently replaced later by the dispatching of messengers to carry the news. In the 4th century of our Common Era a standardized or continuous calendar was established so that the Jewish months came to have a fixed number of days, with the exception of Heshvan and Kislev as well as the month Adar, which still vary between 29 and 30 days according to certain calculations. New Moon Observance. Among the Jews, each new moon marked the occasion for the blowing of trumpets and the offering up of sacrifices according to the law covenant. New 10. 10. 2ch2. 4. PS 81. 3. Compare ISA 1. 13, 14. The offerings prescribed were, in fact, even greater than those normally offered on the regular Sabbath days. New 28. 9-15. While nothing is stated specifically as to the new moons marking a day of rest, the text at Amos 8. 5 indicates a cessation of labor. It was apparently a time of feasting once a 20. 5 as well as an opportune time to gather for instruction in God's law. As 46. 1-3. 2 Chi 4. 22, 23. Issa 66. 23. The seventh new moon of each year corresponding to the first day of the month of Ethanim, or Tishri, was sabbatical, and the law covenant decreed it to be a time of complete rest. 23. 24, 25. New 29. 1-6. It was the day of the trumpet blast, but in a greater sense than that of the other Otextoi acute Miritra Longo, moon 430, to serve other gods. And now fear Jehovah and serve him in faultlessness and in truth, and remove the gods that your forefathers served on the other side of the river and in Egypt, and serve Jehovah. Job also lived among moon worshippers, and he faithfully rejected their practice of kissing the hand to the moon. Job 31. 26-28. The neighboring Midianites used moon-shaped ornaments, even placing them on their camels. JG 8. 21, 26. In Egypt, where both Abraham and later the people of Israel resided, moon worship was prominently practiced in honor of the moon god Thoth, the Egyptian god of measures. Every full moon the Egyptians sacrificed a pig to him. He came to be worshipped in Greece under the title of Hermes Trismegistus, Hermes thrice greatest. Moon worship, in fact, extended all the way to the Western Hemisphere, where ancient ziggurat temples dedicated to the moon have been found in Mexico and Central America. In English, the second day of the week still derives its name from the Anglo-Saxon worship of the moon, Monday originally meaning moon day. The moon worshippers attributed powers of fertility to the moon and looked to it to make their crops and even their animals grow. In Canaan, where the Israelites finally settled, the worship of the moon was carried on by the Canaanite tribes with the accompaniment of immoral rites and ceremonies. There the moon was sometimes worshipped under the symbol of the goddess Ashtath Astarte. Ashtath was said to be the female consort of the male god Baal, and the worship of these two frequently ensnared the Israelites during the period of the Judges. JG 2. 13. 10. 6. King Solomon's foreign wives brought the contamination of moon worship into Judah. Foreign god priests directed the people of Judah and Jerusalem in making sacrificial smoke to the sun, moon, and stars, a practice that continued until King Josiah's time. 1 Chi 11. 3-5, 33. 2 Chi 23. 5, 13, 14. When Jezebel, the daughter of the pagan king Ethbaal who ruled the Sidonians, married King Ahab of Israel, she also brought with her the worship of Baal and, apparently, of the moon goddess Ashtath. 1 Chi 16. 31. The Israelites again met up with moon worship during their exile in Babylon, where the times of the new moons were considered propitious by the Babylonian astrologers for making forecasts of the future. Isra 47. 12, 13. God's word should have served as a protection for the Israelites against such moon worship. It showed the moon to be simply a luminary and a convenient time indicator, devoid of personality. Ge 1. 14-18. At the time of their approach in Canaan, Jehovah specifically warned the nation of Israel that they should not worship heavenly creations as though they were representations of him. Anyone practicing such worship was to be stoned to death. De 4. 15-19. 17. 2-5. By his prophet Jeremiah, God later declared that the bones of deceased idolatrous inhabitants of Jerusalem, including kings, priests, and prophets, would be removed from their graves and become as manure upon the face of the ground. 8. 1, 2. Some have tried to read into the text at Deuteronomy 33. 14 an evidence of pagan influence or a superstitious attitude toward the moon. In the King James Version this text speaks of the precious things put forth by the moon. However, as more modern translations show, the sense of the Hebrew word rendered moon here a middle dot chime is actually months or lunar months and basically refers to the monthly periods in which the fruits ripen. Similarly, Psalm 121:6 has been held by some to indicate a belief in the idea of illness caused by exposure to the moonlight. By reading the entire psalm, however, it becomes evident that such assumption is unfounded, since the psalm rather expresses in poetic form the assurance of God's protection against calamity under all circumstances and at all times, whether in the sunlit day or the moonlit night. Still o textoi acute miritra longo, Mordecai 431 Law Covenant. The new moon of each month is still observed by Orthodox Jews as a minor day of atonement for sins committed during the month just ended. Nisan 14, when the moon was approaching fullness, marked the time of the celebration of the Passover and also the time of the institution by Jesus of the Memorial Supper, or the Lord's evening meal, commemorating his death. Mount 26. 2, 20, 26-30. 1 Co 11. 20-26. Despite the end of the Law Covenant, some of the Jewish Christians, as well as others, tended to hold to the practice of the celebration of the new moons as well as of the Sabbath days, and so they needed Paul's corrective counsel as found at Colossians 2. 16, 17 and Galatians 4. 9-11. Mordecai Chi. 1. One who returned to Jerusalem and Judah in 537 BCE after the 70 years of exile in Babylon. As 2. 1. 2 Mordecai was a prominent Israelite and leader who assisted Zerubbabel and was distinguished in the initial genealogical enrollment of the re-established community in Judah. NE 7. 5-7. 2. The son of Jer the son of Shimei the son of Kish Benjamin at Es 2. 5. An older cousin and guardian of Esther. Es 2. 7 Mordecai is portrayed solely in the Bible book of Esther. The book recounts his prominent part in the affairs of the Persian Empire early in the 5th century BCE. Evidence points to him as the writer of the book of Esther. Some doubt the authenticity of the book or that Mordecai was a real person. Their objection, that he would have had to have been at least 120 years old with a beautiful cousin 100 years younger, is based on the erroneous assumption that Esther 2. 5, 6 denotes that Mordecai went into Babylonian exile along with King Jeconiah. However, the Bible's purpose in this text is, not to recount Mordecai's history, but to give his lineage. Kish may have been Mordecai's great-grandfather, or even an earlier ancestor who was taken into exile. Another view, harmonious with biblical expression, is that Mordecai, though born in exile, was considered to have been taken into exile in 617 BCE, since he was in the loins of his ancestors, as yet unborn. Compare Heb 7. 9, 10. Loyal as servant to the king. In the account, Mordecai, although a Jewish exile, was a servant of the king. He heard that Queen Vashti had been deposed by King Ahasuerus of Persia and that all the beautiful young virgins throughout the empire were being brought together so that from among them a replacement might be found for the queenly office. Mordecai's cousin Esther, a girl pretty in form and beautiful in appearance, was introduced into the candidacy for queenship, but her Jewish background was not revealed. As 2. 7, 8 she was selected as queen. Mordecai continued in his duties, sitting in the king's gate, when information was brought to him that 2 of the court officials, Bigthan and Teresh, were plotting to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. He warned the king through Esther, and his act of loyalty was recorded in the book of the affairs of the days. As 2. 21-23. Refuses to bow to Haman. Subsequent to this, Haman the Agagite was made prime minister by Ahasuerus, who ordered that all in the king's gate prostrate themselves before Haman in his newly exalted position. Mordecai staunchly refused to do so and gave as a reason that he was a Jew. As 3. 1-4 The fact that Mordecai based his action on this reason proves that it had to do with his relationship, as a dedicated Jew, to his God Jehovah. He recognized that prostrating himself before Haman involved more than falling down to the earth for an exalted personage, as Israelites had done in the past, merely acknowledging such a once superior position as ruler. 2 So 14. 4. 18. 28. 1 Chi 1. 16. In Haman's case there was good reason why Mordecai did not bow. Haman was probably an Amalekite, and Jehovah had expressed himself as being at war with Amalek from generation to generation. Acts 17. 16. See Haman. O texto e acute miritra longo, Mire 432 providentially directed, during a sleepless night, to the official book of records of the state. The king was thereby reminded of the fact that Mordecai had not been rewarded for his past service, that is, for uncovering the seditious plot of Bigthan and Teresh. At this the king desired to honor Mordecai grandly. To the mortification of Haman, who was commanded to arrange and announce this honor publicly. As 6. 1-12. Esther succeeded in indicting Haman for gross misrepresentation and calumniation of the Jews and for treacherous scheming against the king's own interests as well. The enraged Ahasuerus ordered the death sentence for Haman, and the 22 high 73 feet stake Haman had erected for Mordecai was used to hang Haman's own body. As 7. 1-10. Mordecai now replaced Haman as prime minister and received the king's own signet ring for sealing state documents. Esther placed Mordecai over the house of Haman, which the king had turned over to her. Then Mordecai used the king's authorization to issue a counter-decree giving the Jews the legal right to defend themselves. To the Jews it was a light of deliverance and joy. Many in the Persian Empire aligned themselves with the Jews, and when Adar 13, the day for the laws to take force, arrived, the Jews were prepared. Officialdom stood behind them because of Mordecai's high position. In Shushan the fighting was extended for another day. More than 75,000 enemies of the Jews in the Persian Empire were destroyed, including the 10 sons of Haman. As 8. 1. 9. 18. With Esther's confirmation Mordecai commanded the annual celebration of the festival of the 14th and 15th days of Adar, the days of Purim, for rejoicing and banqueting and giving gifts to one another and to the poor. The Jews accepted and imposed the festival on their offspring and all those joining themselves to them. As second in the empire, Mordecai was respected by God's dedicated people the Jews and continued working for their welfare. As 9. 19-22, 27-32. 10. 2, 3. A man of faith. Mordecai was a man of faith like those spoken of by the Apostle Paul at Hebrews chapter 11, though not mentioned there by name. He displayed courage, decisiveness, integrity, and loyalty to God and his people, and he followed the principle later expressed by Jesus. Pay back, therefore, Caesar's things to Caesar, but God's things to God. Mount 22. 21. He and Esther were of the tribe of Benjamin, of whom the patriarch Jacob had prophesied. Benjamin will keep on tearing like a wolf. In the morning he will eat the animal seized and at evening he will divide spoil. Ge 49. 27. The activity of these Benjamites was in the evening of the nation of Israel, after their kings were no longer on the throne and they had come under Gentile domination. It is possible that Mordecai and Esther had the privilege of destroying the last of the hated Amalekites. Mordecai's interest in the welfare of his countrymen indicates that he had faith that from among the children of Israel would come the seed of Abraham to bless all families of the earth. Ge 12. 2. 22. 18. Moreh. 1. At least by Abraham's time the big trees of Moreh constituted a well-known landmark near Shechem and seemingly continued to be such for centuries afterward. Ge 12. 6. 11. 30. Perhaps also alluded to at Ge 35. 4. Jos 24. 25, 26. JG 9. 6. Some scholars link the big tree of Moanim with the big trees of Moreh. JG 9. 37. Moreh was perhaps the name of the original owner of the plot near Shechem that had one especially prominent tree or a clump or grove of big trees. 2. The name of a hill, in the vicinity of which the Midianites were defeated by Gideon. JG 7. 1. This hill is generally thought to be the bare grey ridge of Jebel Tahigivat Hamor, about 8 kilometers 5 mi of the suggested site for the well of Herod. Moresheth Moresh Middle.eth, Moresheth Gath possession of Gath. Apparently the home of the prophet Micah. Girotextoi acute miritra longo. Mortar, I-433 with the taking of a census. 2-24. 16-25. 1ch21. 15-28. 2ch3. 1. Sierra. Ancient Jewish tradition links the temple site with the mountain in the land of Moriah where Abraham, at God's command, attempted to offer up Isaac. GE 22. 2. See Jewish Antiquities, 7, 329-334 13, 4. This would make the land of Moriah the mountainous region around Jerusalem. It was to the land of Moriah that Abraham traveled from the vicinity of Beersheba. And on the third day, he saw that divinely designated place from a distance. GE 21. 33, 34. 22. 4, 19. Some have objected to identifying Mount Moriah with the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, because of its distance from Beersheba and its lack of visibility from a distance. But it was to the land of Moriah that Abraham was to make a trip. On the first day, Abraham rose early, saddled his ass, split the wood, loaded it on the animal, and then began his trip. GE 22. 2, 3. It was on the third day that Abraham raised his eyes and began to see the place the land of Moriah from a distance. Thus, the second day was the only full day of travel. As to the visibility of Mount Moriah and the traveling distance, the Illustrated Bible Dictionary notes. However, the distance from Es Philistia to Jerusalem is c. 80 kilometers, which might well have required 3 days to traverse, and in Genesis the place in question is not a Mount Moriah but one of several mountains in the land of that name, and the hills on which Jerusalem stands are visible at a distance. There is no need to doubt therefore that Abraham's sacrifice took place on the site of later Jerusalem, if not on the Temple Hill. Edited by J. Douglas, 1980, Volume 2, p. 1025. Therefore, the trip of some 80 kilometers 50 mi on foot from Beersheba to Mount Moriah would conceivably have taken more than 2 full days. Mount Moriah evidently was far enough from the Salem of Abraham's time that the attempted sacrifice of Isaac did not take place in full view of the city's inhabitants. There is no record that these witnessed the incident or tried to interfere. That the site was somewhat isolated centuries later may be deduced from the fact that in David's day there was a threshing floor on Mount Moriah. However, no mention is made of any buildings on the site. 2ch3. 1. Today the Islamic shrine known as the Dome of the Rock is situated atop Mount Moriah. See Jerusalem later periods. Mortar, a vessel having a bowl-shaped interior in which grain, spices, olives, or other substances were pulverized by pounding with a pestle. Egyptian tomb paintings depict mortars with considerable capacity. These were probably wooden mortars, and likely the pestles were made of metal. One tomb painting shows 2 men at one mortar, alternately raising and dropping metal pestles club-shaped at both ends, which they gripped at the center with both hands. The painting indicates that after a quantity of material in the mortar had been pounded sufficiently, it was sifted into another container and the coarser remains were returned to the mortar for further pounding. In the wilderness the Israelites prepared manna for consumption by grinding it in hand mills or pounding it in a mortar heb. Mdhomiddle.car. U11. 7, 8. The finest olive oil was obtained by beating the olives in a mortar with a pestle. This produced oil from only the olive meat, whereas a press crushed the seeds also. Pure, beaten olive oil was required for burning in the lampstand in the tent of meeting. Beaten oil was also used in connection with the constant burnt offering and evidently in the holy anointing oil. Incense beaten into powder was used in the sanctuary. X27. 20, 21. 29. 40, 42. 30. 23-25, 35, 36. Since a mortar has a hollow interior, it is suitably used in the Bible to describe the configuration of a specific land area. For instance, according to Judges 15. 18, 19, God provided drinking water for Samson by splitting open Otextoi acute miritra longo mortar, 2434 or mortar quarter heb. Make middle.tesh, meaning mortar, may have been so named to identify a basin-like hollow or depression in that area of the city. Zep 1. 11, ftn. grain reduced to flour in a mortar undergoes very severe treatment. Therefore, the scriptures use this procedure illustratively, saying, even if you should pound the foolish one fine with a pestle in a mortar heb. Bam make tesh, in among cracked grain, his foolishness will not depart from him. PR 27. 22. Mortar, 2. A composition that is applied between bricks and stones to cement them together as in a wall, or that is used as a wall coating. But 14. 42, 45. 1 ch 29. 2. Isla 54. 11. J 43. 9. A weather-resistant mixture properly termed mortar of lime, sand, and water was used in the construction of the finer homes in ancient Palestine. Another type of mortar, used as plaster, was prepared by blending sand, ashes, and lime. Sometimes oil was added to the mixture, or the wall was coated with oil after it was plastered, to produce a nearly waterproof surface. In Egypt even up to modern times mortar used for wall plaster has been composed of 2 parts clay, 1 part lime, and 1 part straw and ashes. Instead of conventional mortar, the builders of the Tower of Babel used bitumen, which served as mortar for them. GE 11. 3. The later Babylonians likely obtained their bitumen for mortar from the subterranean fountains near the city of Hit located not far from Babylon on the Euphrates River. According to Herodotus I, 179, hot asphalt bitumen was used as cement, or mortar, when building up the sides of Babylon's moat and when constructing the city's wall. While the Israelites were slaves in Egypt, the Egyptians kept making their life bitter with hard slavery at clay mortar and bricks. X1. 14. The mortar was mixed to about the consistency of molasses, usually by trampling it with the feet. Chopped straw was combined with the mortar to increase the cohesiveness of the mixture. Later, in their own land, clay mortar and mud bricks served the Israelites as basic building materials in areas where little good quality building stone was available. Mud bricks were not lastingly resistant to wet weather. Therefore, in order to protect a new wall or to save and strengthen a damaged wall, a coat of mortar, or plaster, was sometimes applied. However, if only whitewash or bad mortar containing little or no lime was daubed on such a wall, it could not be expected to withstand severe storms. Compare IS 13. 11-16. Mosera Momidal.Sra, Moseroth Momidal.Roth. The place where the Israelites were encamped when Aaron died. 10. 6. It was evidently near Mount Hor whereon Aaron died, but its exact location is unknown. New 33. 38. The plural form of Mosera, Moseroth, appears at Numbers 33. 30, 31 and apparently refers to an earlier Israelite encampment there. Moses drawn out, that is, saved out of water. Man of the true God, leader of the nation of Israel, mediator of the law covenant, prophet, judge, commander, historian, and writer. S3. 2. Moses was born in 1593 BCE in Egypt, being the son of Amram, the grandson of Kohath, and the great-grandson of Levi. His mother Jochebed was Kohath's sister. See, however, Jochebed. Moses was 3 years younger than his brother Aaron. Miriam their sister was some years older. X6. 16, 18, 20. 2. 7. Early life in Egypt. Moses, a divinely beautiful child, was spared from Pharaoh's genocidal decree commanding the destruction of every newborn Hebrew male. He was hidden by his mother for 3 months, then placed in a papyrus ark among the reeds by the bank of the Nile River, where Pharaoh's daughter found him. Through the wise action of his mother and sister, Moses came to be nursed and trained by his mother in the employment of the daughter of Pharaoh, who then adopted him as her son. As a member of Pharaoh's household, he was otextoi acute miritra longo. Moses 435. Actually, Moses felt at the time had come that he would be able to give the Hebrews salvation. But they did not appreciate his efforts, and Moses was forced to flee from Egypt when Pharaoh heard of the slaying of the Egyptian. X2. 11-15. Acts 7. 23-29. 40 years in Midian. It was a long journey across wilderness territory to Midian, where Moses sought refuge. There, at a well, Moses' courage and readiness to act forcefully to help those suffering injustice again came to the fore. When shepherds drove away the 7 daughters of Jethro and their flock, Moses delivered the women and watered the flocks for them. As a result, he was invited to Jethro's house, where he entered Jethro's employment as a shepherd for his flocks and eventually married one of Jethro's daughters, Zipporah, who bore him 2 sons, Gershom and Eliezer. Acts 2. 16-22. 18. 2-4. Training for future service. While it was God's purpose to deliver the Hebrews by the hand of Moses, God's due time had not yet arrived. Neither was Moses yet qualified to serve over God's people. He had to undergo another 40 years of training. The qualities of patience, meekness, humility, long-suffering, mildness of temper, self-control, and learning to wait on Jehovah needed to be developed in him to a higher degree, in order for him to be the fitting one to lead God's people. He had to be groomed and prepared to endure the discouragements, disappointments, and hardships he would encounter, and to handle with loving kindness, calmness, and strength the multitude of problems a great nation would present. He possessed much learning, and his training as a member of Pharaoh's household had doubtless given him dignity, confidence, and poise, and had accentuated his ability to organize and command. But the lowly occupation of shepherding in Midian provided the training needed to develop fine qualities that would be even more important for the task ahead of him. Similarly, David underwent rigorous training, even after being anointed by Samuel, and Jesus Christ was tried, tested, and proved to be perfected as king and high priest forever. Yet Christ learned obedience from the things he suffered. And after he has been made perfect, he became responsible for everlasting salvation to all those obeying him. Heb 5. 8, 9. His appointment as deliverer. Toward the end of his 40-year sojourn in Midian, Moses was shepherding Jethro's flock near Mount Horeb when he was amazed to see a thorn bush flaming with fire but not consumed. As he approached to inspect this great phenomenon, Jehovah's angel spoke out of the flame, revealing that it was now time for God to deliver Israel out of bondage and commissioning Moses to go in his memorial named Jehovah. Acts 3. 1-15. Thus God appointed Moses as his prophet and representative, and Moses could now correctly be called an anointed one, or Messiah, or the Christ as at Hebrews 11. 26. Jehovah, through the angel, provided credentials that Moses could present to the older men of Israel. These were in the form of 3 miracles as signs. Here, for the first time in the scriptures, we read of a human empowered to perform miracles. Acts 4. 1-9. Moses not disqualified because of diffidence. But Moses showed diffidence, arguing that he was unable to speak fluently. Here was a changed Moses, quite different from the one who had, of his own accord, offered himself as Israel's deliverer 40 years earlier. He continued to remonstrate with Jehovah, finally asking Jehovah to excuse him from the task. Although this aroused God's anger, he did not reject Moses, but provided Moses' brother Aaron as a mouthpiece. Thus, as Moses was representative for God, so Moses became as God to Aaron, who spoke representatively for him. In the ensuing meeting with the older men of Israel and the encounters with Pharaoh, it appears that God gave Moses the instructions and commands, and Moses, in turn, relayed them to Aaron. O textoi acute miritra longo. Moses 436. Surface of the ground. New 12. 3. As a meek person, he recognized that he was a mere human, with imperfections and weaknesses. He did not push himself forward as Israel's invincible leader. He expressed, not fear of Pharaoh, but an acute awareness of his own limitations. Before Pharaoh of Egypt, Moses and Aaron were now key figures in a battle of the gods. In the persons of the magic-practicing priests, the chiefs of whom were apparently named Jan and Jambres 2-3. 8. Pharaoh summoned the power of all the gods of Egypt against the power of Jehovah. The first miracle that Aaron performed before Pharaoh at Moses' direction proved Jehovah's supremacy over the gods of Egypt, even though Pharaoh became more obstinate. Acts 7. 8-13. Later, when the third plague occurred, even the priests were forced to admit, it is the finger of God. And they were so severely stricken by the plague of boils that they were altogether unable even to appear before Pharaoh to oppose Moses during that plague. Acts 8. 16-19. 9. 10-12. Plagues do softening and hardening work. Moses and Aaron became the announcers of each of the 10 plagues. The plagues came as announced, proving Moses' commission as Jehovah's representative. Jehovah's name was declared and much talked about in Egypt, accomplishing both a softening and a hardening toward that name. Softening the Israelites and some of the Egyptians. Hardening Pharaoh and his advisors and supporters. Acts 9. 16. 11. 10. 12. 29-39. Instead of believing that they had offended their gods, the Egyptians knew that it was Jehovah who was judging their gods. By the time 9 plagues had been executed, Moses too had become very great in the land of Egypt, in the eyes of Pharaoh's servants and in the eyes of the people. Acts 11. 3. There was a marked change in the men of Israel also. They had at first accepted Moses' credentials, but after experiencing harder working conditions at the order of Pharaoh, they complained against him to the point that Moses in discouragement appealed to Jehovah. Acts 4. 29-31. 5. 19-23. The Most High at that time strengthened him by revealing that he was now going to fulfill that for which Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob had looked, namely, the full revealing of the meaning of his name Jehovah and delivering Israel and establishing it as a great nation in the land of promise. Acts 6. 1-8. Even then the men of Israel did not listen to Moses. But now, after the 9th plague, they were solidly behind him, cooperating so that, after the 10th plague, he could organize them and lead them out in an orderly way, in battle formation. Acts 13. 18. Courage and faith required to face Pharaoh. It was only in the strength of Jehovah and due to the operation of his Spirit upon them that Moses and Aaron proved equal to the task set before them. Picture the court of Pharaoh, the king of the undisputed world power of that time. Here was unparalleled splendor, the haughty Pharaoh, supposed to be a god himself, surrounded by his advisors, military commanders, guards, and slaves. Moreover, there were the religious leaders, the magic-practicing priests, chief among Moses' opposers. These men were, aside from Pharaoh himself, the most powerful men in the realm. All this impressive array was aligned to back up Pharaoh in support of the gods of Egypt. And Moses and Aaron came before Pharaoh, not once, but many times, Pharaoh's heart getting harder each time, because he was determined to keep his valuable Hebrew slaves under his domination. In fact, after announcing the 8th plague, Moses and Aaron were driven out from before Pharaoh, and after the 9th plague they were ordered not to try to see Pharaoh's face again on pain of death. Acts 10. 11, 28. With these things in mind, it becomes most understandable that Moses repeatedly appealed to Jehovah for assurance and strength. But it must be noted that he never failed to carry out to the letter what Jehovah textoi acute miritra longo. Moses 437 centuries later the Apostle Paul said, of Israel's subsequent crossing of the Red Sea. Our forefathers were all under the cloud, and all passed through the sea, and all got baptized into Moses by means of the cloud and of the sea. 1 Co 10. 1, 2 Jehovah did the baptizing. To be delivered from their murderous pursuers, the Jewish forefathers had to unite themselves with Moses as head and follow his leadership as he led them through the sea. The entire congregation of Israel was thus, in effect, immersed into the liberator and leader Moses, mediator of the law covenant. In the 3rd month after the exodus from Egypt, Jehovah demonstrated before all Israel the greatness of the authority and responsibility that he placed upon his servant Moses as well as the intimacy of Moses' position with God. Before all Israel, gathered at the foot of Mount Horeb, Jehovah called Moses into the mountain and, by means of an angel, spoke with him. On one occasion Moses was privileged to have what was probably the most awe-inspiring experience of any man prior to the coming of Jesus Christ. High in the mountain, alone, Jehovah gave him a vision of his glory, putting his palm over Moses as a screen, allowing Moses to see his back, evidently the afterglow of this divine manifestation of glory. Then he spoke to Moses personally, as it were. Acts 19. 1-3. 33. 18-23. 34. 4-6. Jehovah told Moses, "You are not able to see my face, because no man may see me and yet live." Acts 33. 20. And centuries later, the Apostle John wrote, "No man has seen God at any time. Jo 1. 18. The Christian martyr Stephen told the Jews, "This Moses is he that came to be among the congregation in the wilderness with the angel that spoke to him on Mount Sinai." Acts 7. 38. So Jehovah was represented on the mountain by an angel. Nevertheless, such was the glory of Jehovah as manifested by Jehovah's angelic representative that the skin of Moses' face emitted rays so that the sons of Israel could not bear to look at him. Acts 34. 29-35. 2 Co 3. 7, 13. God constituted Moses mediator of the law covenant with Israel, an intimate position such as no man has ever held before God except Jesus Christ, the mediator of the new covenant. With the blood of animal sacrifices Moses sprinkled the book of the covenant, representing Jehovah as one party, and the people note out the representative older men as the other party. He read the book of the covenant to the people, who replied, "All that Jehovah has spoken we are willing to do and be obedient." Acts 24. 3-8. Job 9. 19. In his office of mediator, Moses was privileged to oversee the building of the tabernacle and the making of its utensils, the pattern of which God gave to him, and to install the priesthood in office, anointing the tabernacle and Aaron the high priest with the oil of special composition. Then he took oversight of the first official services of the newly consecrated priesthood. Acts chapters 25-29. The chaps 8, 9. A fitting mediator. Moses went up Mount Horeb several times, remaining on 2 occasions for periods of 40 days and nights. Acts 24. 18. 34. 28. After the first of these occasions he returned with 2 stone tablets written on by God's finger, containing the 10 words or 10 commandments, the basic laws of the law covenant. Acts 31. 18. 4. 13. On this first occasion Moses showed himself to be fittingly qualified as mediator between Jehovah and Israel and leader of this great nation of perhaps 3 million or more. When Moses was in the mountain, Jehovah informed him that the people had turned to idolatry, and Jehovah said, "Now let me be, that my anger may blaze against them and I may exterminate them, and let me make you into a great nation." Moses' immediate reply revealed that the sanctification of Jehovah's name was the thing of primary importance to him. That he was completely unselfish and did not desire fame for himself. He asked nothing for himself but, rather, O textoi acute miritra longo, Moses 438. Many were the times that Moses represented Jehovah's side of the covenant, commanding true, clean worship and executing judgment on disobedient ones. More than once he also stood between the nation, or individuals thereof, and their destruction at Jehovah's hand. New 12. 14. 11-21. 16. 20-22, 43-50. 21. 7. 9. 18-20. Unselfishness, humility, meekness. Moses' chief interests were in Jehovah's name and his people. Consequently he was not one to seek glory or position. When Jehovah's Spirit came upon certain men in the camp and they began to act as prophets, Moses' assistant Joshua wanted to restrain them, evidently because he felt that they were detracting from Moses' glory and authority. But Moses replied, "Are you feeling jealous for me? No, I wish that all of Jehovah's people were prophets, because Jehovah would put his Spirit upon them." New 11. 24-29. Although he was Jehovah's appointed leader of the great nation of Israel, Moses was willing to accept counsel from others, particularly when it would be of value to the nation. Shortly after the Israelites left Egypt, Jethro visited Moses, bringing with him his wife and sons. Jethro observed how hard Moses was working, wearing himself out handling the problems of everyone who came to him. He wisely suggested an orderly arrangement wherein Moses would delegate degrees of responsibility to others, to lighten his load. Moses listened to Jethro's advice, accepted it, and organized the people into thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens, with a chief over each group as a judge. Only the difficult cases were then brought to Moses. It is noteworthy also that Moses, explaining to Jethro what he was doing, said, "In the event that a people have a case arise, it must come to me and I must judge between the one party and the other, and I must make known the decisions of the true God and his laws. In this, Moses indicated that he recognized his duty to judge, not according to his own ideas, but according to Jehovah's decisions, and that, moreover, he had the responsibility to help the people to know and recognize God's laws. X 18. 5-7, 13-27. Moses repeatedly pointed to Jehovah, and not himself, as the real leader. When the people began to complain about food, Moses told them, "Your murmurings are not against us, Moses and Aaron, but against Jehovah." X 16. 3-6-8. Possibly because Miriam felt her prominence might be eclipsed by the presence of Moses' wife, she and Aaron jealously and disrespectfully began to speak against Moses and his authority. The record shows that their speech was all the more contemptible, because it is at this point that it says, "The man Moses was by far the meekest of all the men who were upon the surface of the ground." Moses apparently was hesitant to assert himself, meekly enduring the abuse. But Jehovah was incensed at this challenge, which was actually an affront to Jehovah himself. He took up the issue and severely chastised Miriam. Moses' love for his sister moved him to intercede for her, crying out, "O God, please. Heal her, please." New 12. 1-15. Obedience, waiting upon Jehovah. Moses waited upon Jehovah. Though he is called Israel's lawgiver, he recognized that the laws did not originate with him. He was not arbitrary, deciding matters on his own knowledge. In legal cases in which there was no precedent, or where he could not discern exactly how to apply the law, he presented the matter to Jehovah to establish a judicial decision. 24. 10-16, 23. New 15. 32-36. 27. 1-11. He was careful to carry out instructions. In the intricate work of constructing the tabernacle and making its utensils and the priest's garments, Moses exercised close oversight. The record reads, "And Moses proceeded to do according to all that Jehovah had commanded him. He did just so." X 40. 16. Compare New 17. 11. Repeatedly we find other statements that things were done just as Jehovah had commanded. O text to acute miritra longo. Moses 439 directed attention to themselves, Moses saying, "Hear, now, you rebels. Is it from this crag that we shall bring out water for you?" With that, Moses struck the rock and Jehovah caused water to flow forth, sufficient for the multitude and their flocks. But God was displeased with the conduct of Moses and Aaron. They had failed of their primary responsibility, namely, to magnify Jehovah's name. They acted undutifully toward Jehovah, and Moses had spoken rashly with his lips. Later Jehovah decreed, "Because you did not show faith in me to sanctify me before the eyes of the sons of Israel, therefore you will not bring this congregation into the land that I shall certainly give them." New 20. 1-13. 32. 50-52. PS 106. 32, 33. A writer. Moses was the writer of the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible, namely, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. His writership has been acknowledged by the Jews throughout their history, this section of the Bible being known by them as the Torah, or law. Jesus and the Christian writers frequently speak of Moses as giving the law. He is generally credited with writing the book of Job, also Psalm 90 and, possibly, 91. Mount 8. 4. Lu 16. 29. 24. 27. Row 10. 5. 1 Co 9. 9. 2 Co 3. 15. Heb 10. 28. His death and burial. Moses' brother Aaron died at the age of 123 years, while Israel was encamped at Mount Hor, on the frontier of Edom, in the 5th month of the 40th year of their journey. Moses took Aaron into the mountain, stripped off Aaron's priestly garments, and clothed Aaron's oldest living son and successor, Eleazar, with them. New 20. 22-29. 33. 37-39. About 6 months later, Israel arrived at the plains of Moab. Here Moses, in a series of discourses, explain the law to the assembled nation, enlarging upon it with adjustments that would be necessary when Israel changed from nomadic camp life to a settled one in their own land. In the 12th month of the 40th year in the spring of 1473 BCE he announced to the people that, according to Jehovah's appointment, Joshua would succeed him as leader. Joshua was then commissioned and exhorted to be courageous. The 31. 1-3, Finally, after reciting a song and blessing the people, Moses went up into Mount Nebo according to Jehovah's command, first to view the promised land from this mountain vantage point, then to die. The 32. 48-51. 34. 1-6. Moses was 120 years of age at the time of his death. Testifying to his natural strength, the Bible comments, his eye had not grown dim, and his vital strength had not fled. He was buried by Jehovah in a location ever since discovered. The 34. 5-7 Likely, this was to prevent the Israelites from being ensnared into false worship by making a shrine of his grave. Evidently the devil desired to use Moses' body for some such purpose, for Jude, the Christian disciple and half-brother of Jesus Christ, writes, when Michael the archangel had a difference with the devil and was disputing about Moses' body, he did not dare to bring the judgment against him in abusive terms, but said, may Jehovah rebuke you. Jude 9. Before crossing over into Canaan under the leadership of Joshua, Israel observed a 30-day mourning period for Moses. The 34. 8. A prophet Jehovah knew face to face. When Miriam and Aaron challenged Moses' authority, Jehovah told them, if there came to be a prophet of yours for Jehovah, it would be in a vision I would make myself known to him. In a dream I would speak to him. Not so my servant Moses. He is being entrusted with all my house. Mouth to mouth I speak to him, thus showing him, and not by riddles. And the appearance of Jehovah is what he beholds. Why, then, did you not fear to speak against my servant, against Moses? New 12. 6-8 The conclusion of the book of Deuteronomy describes Moses' privileged standing with Jehovah. But there has never yet risen up a prophet in Israel like Moses, whom Jehovah knew face to face, as respecto textui acute miritra longo. Moses 440 had beheld God with his own eyes, instead of merely having a mental vision or a dream in which he heard God speak, which was the usual way in which God communicated with his prophets. Jehovah's dealings with Moses were so real that Moses reacted as if he had seen the one who is invisible. Heb 11. 27 Evidently the impression made on Moses was similar to the effect of the Transfiguration vision on Peter centuries later. The vision was so real to Peter that he began to participate in it, speaking but not realizing what he was saying. Luke 9. 28-36 And the Apostle Paul likewise experienced a vision that was so real that he later said of himself, whether in the body I do not know, or out of the body I do not know. God knows. 2 Co 12. 1-4. No doubt Joshua's extraordinary success in establishing Israel in the promised land came, to an extent, by reason of the fine qualities inculcated in him by Moses' training and example. Joshua was Moses' minister from his young manhood on. New 11. 28 Evidently he was army commander under Moses x 17. 9, 10 and was close to Moses as his attendant in many experiences. X 24. 13. 33. 11. To 3. 21. Prefigured Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ made clear that Moses had written about him, for on one occasion he told his opponents, if you believe Moses you would believe me, for that one wrote about me. Job 5. 46 Commencing at Moses and all the prophets, when in the company of his disciples, Jesus interpreted to them things pertaining to himself in all the scriptures. Luke 24. 27, 44. See also Job 1. 45. Among the things Moses wrote concerning Christ Jesus are Jehovah's words. A prophet I shall raise up for them from the midst of their brothers, like you. And I shall indeed put my words in his mouth, and he will certainly speak to them all that I shall command him. 18. 19 The Apostle Peter in quoting this prophecy left no doubt that it referred to Jesus Christ. Act 3. 19-23. In many ways there was pictorial correspondency between these two great prophets, Moses and Jesus Christ. In infancy both escaped the wholesale slaughter ordered by the respective rulers of their time. X1 22 2 1-10 Mount 2 13-80 Moses was called out of Egypt with